Thank you very much. A fascinating insight into what's been happening in Japan. It also sounds like there's plenty of work for economists and social scientists, of course, to investigate some of the responses we've seen there in the light of the disasters that hit 2 years ago. Now, I'm hoping that we have somewhere in the audience, Guthridge from Accenture. Who's standing in front of me now? I was sitting there 2 seconds ago. So right, Greg. We started off this morning with a very useful insight into consumer engagement. So I think it's very fitting that we come back to that subject now, and I'll hand over to Greg to take it. Thanks.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I realize that I'm standing between you and lunch. The worst time slot of the day. But anyway, very pleased to be here. I think it was extremely interesting to hear the first two presentations, and what I'm going to do is go in some ways in a very different direction and talk a little bit about our views on the new energy consumer. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Greg Guthridge. The program says that I'm from the UK, but I haven't actually lived there for a number of years. I'm based out of Vancouver in Canada, and after a long flight and a little bit of jet lag, I'm quite happy to be at the conference this week. What I would like to do is describe to you a little bit about what we tried to do with our research. About 5 years ago, we saw the beginnings of the trends around smart metering, around strong emphasis on energy efficiency and demand response. And we decided at that time to commission a multi-year research program that's really focused on answering a number of fundamental questions from a consumer, from a customer perspective. You know, clearly utilities and boardrooms all around the world right now are trying to figure out how do they roll out energy efficiency and demand management and smart metering programs at a reasonable cost. How do they get consumers to change their behaviors without them picking up the phone and calling too much? How do they present information to consumers that they can digest simply? And how do they rebalance their business models in the future, potentially looking at, you know, beyond the meter and new capabilities in the home, which might open up either more retention or stickiness if you're a retailer, and in any matter, more revenue streams and opportunities from products and services. So, you know, how do we approach cost-effective programs? How do we drive additional revenue? How do we improve, if possibly, the consumer experience? And then, of course, how do we drive measurable energy efficiency? And I think my colleague from Japan's presentation was very interesting insofar as, you know, Japan has been through some incredible, a horrendously complex couple of years since Fukushima. But for the rest of the world, we don't have the shock ability that Japan experienced, and so we need to find ways of energizing consumers around energy efficiency, and it goes well beyond simply just having new pricing signals and in-home style displays, and I'll describe that here in a moment. So our research is in its fourth year right now, 40,000 global consumers, 19 countries. You can see the different countries that we've selected. We've also talked to over 100 energy providers around the world and chief customer officers from a number of leading utilities, telecommunications companies, healthcare, and banking, because we see a lot of synergies with what's going on in some of the other industries as it relates to driving sustainable, low-cost energy efficiency and demand management style programs. We selected these countries in hopes that we would see, you know, progressive countries doing certain things and lagging countries doing other things. And what we found is that in every single country there is innovation occurring. Some of it is small and in a pilot format, but in other cases it's actually at scale now. And in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to try to describe what some of the key findings are of the research. We call the research the new energy consumer, and it really aims to understand what consumers will look like maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and how and what they want from their energy provider and from the technologies in their home. And hopefully you'll get a few nuggets here. Some of it might be a little bit provocative. And clearly, in 15 minutes, I can't cover all the research. So if you want the details, you can always go out to our website or to our booth downstairs, and we've got hard copies. So there are 7 themes that I'm going to talk about, and the first theme of the research is really around consumer energy, engagement, and trust. It is, a number of people have mentioned that consumers may or may not trust their energy provider. That's particularly true in competitive markets, in fiercely competitive markets like Australia, like the UK, where there's a lot of pricing signals and a lot of confusing marketing and sales messages where you may find lower levels of trust. But generally around the world, consumers do trust their utilities, but it is a low-value interaction. In our research, we found that consumers on average in Europe only interact with their utility energy provider a total of 9 minutes per year. It's very low value. 70 or 80% of all interactions are actually negative. It's not surprising. Consumers don't really want to call when they move house, when they need a payment extension, when they have a high bill inquiry, when they can't understand their invoice, or when their power is out. These are not pleasant experiences, and so we're dealing with a pretty low value interaction. Now, with that as a backdrop, the good news is that 75% of consumers instinctively will turn to their energy provider for new products and services and for advice. So for the time being, energy providers still have the monopoly. They are still the first default option. Now, as we see in a number of markets, with telecommunications and consumer products organizations now starting to offer energy efficiency products and services on their own, we're starting to see a larger percentage of consumers who actually would consider non-energy providers in a much more serious way. So you can consider this a threat if you're a retail energy provider, or potentially a really interesting opportunity for additional value-added products and services and partnerships. The other thing I'll mention is that there's a lot of excitement, and certainly even in my own geography in Vancouver, lots of refusals and opt-outs and all kinds of things, but the vast majority of consumers are actually engaging in smart metering. It's a very small and very vocal minority who are really giving us a hard time, but the research shows that the vast majority are very interested in the technologies and the capabilities of the home. From a customer satisfaction perspective, the research proves the obvious in some ways, which is price stability, reliability, and service quality are top of mind. What we found to be very interesting was the perceived stability and the accuracy of the invoice are extremely important. And as you move into advanced time of use and peak pricing and various other things, the simplicity of the invoice is extremely important. The more complex the invoice, the more difficult it is for people to understand it. The more difficult it is for people to understand it, the lower customer satisfaction goes. And in fact, what we're finding in many pilots and now at scale, where energy providers have gotten more aggressive with time of use and dynamic pricing, it's actually resulted in lower customer satisfaction at scale. Now, of course, there are certain segments of customers who are reacting quite positively, but when it moves to the mass market, when it's everybody who's involved, we actually see reductions in customer satisfaction. Turns out that the more volatility there is in pricing, that translates into lower customer satisfaction. And so adoption style programs need to understand that when you roll out these different kind of pricing signals, you need to have additional education and capabilities around it so that it doesn't actually translate into lower customer satisfaction at the same time. Most energy providers today still, after we sell energy to our customers, treat them as if they in the same business processes largely that we had 30 years ago. Still putting everybody through a one-size-fits-all, very little segmentation, very little tailored or personalized service beyond sales. And consumers continue to say over and over every year in our research that they're looking for differentiated service and things that match their personal lifestyles in a much more relevant way. And then finally, one of the other things that we found that was interesting around customer satisfaction is if you bundle just one additional product or service with your energy, you can improve customer satisfaction by full 5 basis points. And in fact, retention, if you're in a competitive environment, can double. So bundling, which is in some markets a bad word, we can thank our telco and our cable companies for that, is something we're going to see a lot more of across the global energy management space. From a pricing and rewards perspective, it's very clear that pricing signals are and will remain the single most important attribute in getting consumers to change their behavior or to act. But what's very clear is that pricing and pricing alone over the long haul will not continue to drive sustainable behavioral changes. There needs to be something more. And one of the things that we've done is researched a lot as to what's happened in telcos and healthcare and cable and a number of other utilities or home providers, and the need for other kinds of value-added capabilities and attributes beyond price are going to become more and more important. Those can be loyalty points, they can be convenience-oriented, they can be new products and services, they can be affinity programs, you name it. But pricing signals alone over the long haul, we don't see the kind of sustained behavior in the 5-year plus periods. From a personalization perspective, we see, of course, as many energy providers, 6 major customer segments and probably the better part of 50 different subsegments of consumers, and that's growing. So the need to have different products and services and offerings for different kinds of segments is becoming more and more important, and certainly a one-size-fits-all is not going to work. In all of our segmentation work, one of the things that we found extremely interesting was the influence of discretionary time on consumers' energy efficiency behavior. The less discretionary time they have, the more they want set and forget automated programs, and the less interested they are in monitoring their home energy management, evaluating bar charts and graphs and analytics, and then changing their behavior. They actually want somebody to do it for them, or they want to sign up for programs that automate either the notification of the processes or the full process itself. And we see this as an opportunity for energy providers to actually offer new products and services, new capabilities that take a lot of the management and the guesswork out of it and actually do it on behalf of our consumers rather than asking them to constantly monitor their energy management on their own. So the set and forget and the influence of discretionary time. If you're a dual income with children segment, really the amount of time that you have available to monitor your energy home and actually change your behaviors probably fairly limited. And if you had more automated programs, it might be easier for you to actually make long-term sustainable energy management changes. One of the more interesting things that we found in the research is that utilities still, energy providers still define their consumers largely by the bill payer. You can ask executives all around the world, how many customers do you have? And they can answer it one of 2 ways. They can say, I have 5 million customers, or they can say, I serve 12 million consumers. And it tells you a lot about the kind of sophistication the energy provider has in terms of how they're reacting to their total market. In fact, what we found is that between 40 and 50% on average of energy management decisions in the home are influenced by people who are less than 4 feet tall. And none of this, for most energy providers, is known. Who these people are, and these people, of course, can be children, or they can be shrinking grandparents who tend to get shorter over time. That was a joke, by the way. But there are other people in and around the household, whether these are household services people, children, and other providers who are not the bill payer and who actually influence and would use the set and forget and personalized capabilities in a much more sophisticated way. And designing programs simply for the bill payer is a major problem. And we're seeing, of course, a lot of work around gamification and entertainment and other things, offering new kinds of channels and capabilities that are appealing to these other occupants of the home in particular. From a channel perspective, of course, when you look back, when you look at where we're going, a lot of energy providers will say, we want to have a relationship with our customers. We want our customers to call us more often, and we want to be able to help them with their energy management. That is aspirationally true, but when that turns into higher call volumes that are more complex, all of a sudden it costs a lot more money to support these consumers. And so there's a lot of interest in finding a way to drive a more mobility-oriented customer interaction style, so that on 30% of customer interactions are very tailored, very personalized, and 70% of customer interactions are 24/7, real-time, and largely delivered not over web-based, desktop web-based technologies, but over mobility-based technologies. And this is extremely important, and you'll see that actually when we polled consumers, 6 out of 9 primary interactions, or over almost 70% of all interactions, consumers would prefer to do on their own whenever they want over a mobile device, which means that we have a good opportunity to create a dual relationship. And this is very much similar to what's happening in financial services, or what has already happened. If you think about your relationship with your bank, you actually have 2 completely different relationships with them. You have a high-value, personalized relationship when you're buying a home mortgage or a college education or insurance or investments. And as soon as you purchase it, then you have a tailored self-service, largely mobile or web-based capability that you are fairly happy self-serving yourself through, for the most part. We think that energy providers and utilities can move much more aggressively in creating this dual relationship. On one hand, very personalized. On the other hand, very mobile, self-service oriented. And that will actually create the right economics from a customer service model, so that you're not breaking the bank when you're trying to support all of these consumers. Rather horrifically, one of the things that comes up in the research is the need for face-to-face interaction. I don't know about you, but we've spent many years closing all of our local offices and largely becoming a call center-oriented customer model. And in all segments, including the youngest segments of consumers, there is a rising need for, or interest in, more face-to-face interaction, especially for education and sales for more sophisticated energy management products and services in the home. Turns out that it's not so easy for people to educate themselves just over the web, and sometimes they want more of a face-to-face interaction. This points to the need for energy providers to consider new channels and meeting consumers where they have discretionary time in order to drive some of these more sophisticated dialogues. I'm sure all of you have, raise your hand, I guess, if you're on Facebook or on LinkedIn or any of those other. That's good. Everybody is. So is our children, and so is everybody else. And rather scary, about 20, well, you'll see the statistic up here, 30% of consumers now want to interact with their energy provider over social media. In fact, even in my own utility, consumers today will report outages over Facebook. They want to pay their bills over Facebook, and they certainly like to complain about everything over Facebook. And so social media as a full-blown channel is now important. Just 2 years ago, we used to advise that no, from a social media perspective, most energy providers, especially regulated energy providers, really simply need to have just a consumer sentiment tile, just monitor what people are saying and use that information to help improve your business. Now it's two-way, and it's getting more and more and more complex. And we can thank the rest of the industries for creating this dual two-way kind of interaction. And we see this as a great opportunity to push energy efficiency related thinking, products and services, but also they want service over some of these different channels as well. And if any of you are still a little bit cynical about that, all you need to do is ask any energy provider who have rolled out smart metering over the last couple of years and asked them what their experience was with the refusals and the opt-out consumers, how did they get that information? Where did they get it? What excited them? And what caused them to act the way they did? In the vast majority of cases, it came from social media. And clearly, the effects of that in rolling out energy efficiency and smart metering programs is going to continue to grow. The evolving energy ecosystem, we did a significant amount of research looking at different bundling capabilities, and in particular, how new products and services can be delivered in a way that might drive additional revenue streams for especially deregulated retailers. Absolutely, consumers are interested in in-home technologies. There's all kinds of different examples of technologies that people will pay a premium for. And utilities and energy providers are starting to get much more clever in how they partner with other non-energy providers through white labeling and fighter brand capabilities. And then finally, in the beyond the meter area, one of the things that we asked, and we keep asking, is would you as a consumer actually pay a premium? Would you pay a premium for certain products or services? Would you pay your utility or your energy provider that premium? So far, every year it's been increasing, and we're now up to 31% of consumers globally who would pay a premium for some kind of bundled product and service, and in particular, set and forget style programs. So there's a revenue stream here, potentially, for energy providers beyond just the commodity of gas or electricity or water. And then finally, and probably most importantly, if we follow what happened in telecommunications and we look at the sentiment of consumers, they don't want more complex pricing structures, more complex scenarios. They actually want simpler, much more bundled capabilities. In fact, they want products and services that can save time, save money, save the planet, look after the disadvantaged consumers, and offer some kind of advanced in-home product or service. We call these Happy Meals. If you've ever been to McDonald's, you know what I mean. But they are very simple, and they include channels, bundled products and services, and other capabilities that can actually contribute to a simpler interaction model overall. So there you go. The research that we have, what I've just described, is really just some of the key headlines. If you want the actual data behind the research, all of it is available on our website at accenture.com. And if you want the hardback, the books that we have, you can come down to our booth downstairs, and we have a couple of copies there. So I'm going to stop there, and I think we have a panel discussion now.